Okay, so we are talking about bow duels
And how it's
and
trash.
Archer if you don't play Hypixel. It's not trash,
It's not. It's not. I'm just messing.
it's just no, it is trash actually.
What? Oh no, I'm just
Trash
messing.
game. So I play bow duels a lot. Sam plays bow duels a little bit less than a lot, and it's actually a pretty fun game. But basically, I had joined a Discord of other people that play this game mode, which is just 1v1. You only get a bow, and in some servers, ender pearls. And eventually, I wrote a thing because I realized that the game is not competitive. Not because like players aren't like trying to win. It's just not competitive because it doesn't really work like other competitive games. And I ultimately compared it to rock paper scissors because it's kind of random and out of control. So the main thing that I would say makes a game competitive is that both players have already what they're going to do in the game is already laid out. And it's a matter of, so both players know what they're going to do, and ideally they're going to be doing the same thing. And whichever player does it better wins. And so it would seem like that would work out in bow because both players shoot at each other, and whichever one shoots better wins. But the main issue is that you can't predict anything that's going to happen, and you have to in order to do well. To figure out why it doesn't work, you can think about the game in terms of just one shot. So one person has a bow, the other person doesn't. So say I have a bow and one arrow, and Sam doesn't have a bow. So my only goal is to hit Sam, and Sam's only goal is to not get hit. And if you can figure out the technicalities of this situation, it's really the same situation, just repeated over and over, and that's how you get bow 1 versus 1. So if I want to hit Sam, I might first say I'm going to shoot directly at him. So if I do that and he doesn't move, he's going to get hit. And at most ranges that you're going to play in bow 1v1, there's a good bit of time before the arrow will actually get to him. So he has time to move, but if he doesn't move, he gets hit. Now, he also can move. And so if I shoot straight at him and he moves, then he's going to dodge the arrow. So in order for me to hit him, I have to shoot where he's going to be when the arrow gets there. And I don't know that. So from my perspective, I can shoot directly at him, to his left, to his right, and all of them seem like good decisions, but I'm basically just guessing as to where, like, what he's going to do once I shoot. Now, from Sam's perspective, in bow duels, basically there's two different ways you can dodge an arrow. You can either dodge by looking at the arrow, figuring out where it's going, and moving so that you're not in the path. And that is harder. You have to have a lot of time because it's hard to react that quickly to the arrow. But if you have the time, you can figure out where it's going to land and then just move. So you might not even move if you figure out it's not going to hit you. Now, if that doesn't happen, you're doing the other kind of dodging, which basically is before they even shoot, you're ready to do something. You might be ready to stand still. You might be ready to move, jump dodge, move just a little bit, whatever you're going to do. And instead of testing or figuring out where the arrow goes, you just do what you're going to do when they shoot. So you don't figure out if it's a good decision or a bad decision ahead of time, you just move. And so from Sam's perspective, if he's relatively close to me, he's going to have to do that kind of dodging. And it's way more common in bow duels, by the way. So he doesn't try to reaction time dodge the arrow. He just figures out ahead of time, I'm going to stand still, move to the left, move to the right, jump dodge, something like that. And so he is also guessing because he doesn't know where I'm going to shoot. So if I shoot directly at him and he decides to stand still, he gets hit. But he only decided to stand still before even seeing where the arrow was going to go. So both of us in this hypothetical situation are just guessing. There's nothing we can do to actually ensure that we get an advantage. It's also important to realize that in most games, there's a lot of goals that are players are constantly going for them. And in bow duels, you're really not limited by anything. you don't have an incentive to stand still or move a certain way, or you don't really have an incentive to shoot in a certain way, because the only goal that you have is to hit the opponent and not get hit by the opponent. So it's just as good an idea to stand still as it is to sprint away. And it's just as good an idea to shoot directly at the person as it is to shoot slightly off, because you have no clue what they're going to do. So already this situation explains the basis as to why you can't have skill or control in the game, and why ultimately I ended up saying that the skill ceiling in the game is like an inch above the floor. There's not much you can do, and even when you expand, so now say I have a bow and multiple arrows, so I can take multiple shots, but Sam also has a bow. So this is the actual game now. So we're both shooting and both dodging, but that doesn't really change anything, because we still have to figure out ahead of time what we're going to do. And there's no way of guaranteeing. Even if I think very strongly that Sam is about to move to his left, my right, and I shoot to my right, I can't be sure. I can't guarantee that that's what he's going to do, and so that arrow might not hit. People that play Bow Duels a lot do not really agree with any of this, which isn't surprising. And there's a couple things that they will point out to explain why there is skill and why there are things that you have to do in order to win or have higher chances of winning. Some of those ideas do make sense, some of them don't at all. The idea that doesn't make any sense is the idea that you just really can predict what people are going to do.
Right.
And the way that people explain that is by habits, because it is noticeable. If you play Bow Duels, you actually will notice everybody has habits as to what they're going to do, especially they have habits as to what they're going to do because of what just happened like a second or two earlier. And that's noticeable. But it's not really...
You'd have to play a few
good.
games to even recognize some of that.
Yeah.
And against the same
And
person.
when you're... Yeah. If you go against someone you've never played before, it's not going to help you. And even if you can kind of figure out how they play over time, how they play is very complicated. Especially if they're a more experienced player, they might be prepared to intentionally change how they play to match your play. So at that point, you're trying to match them, they're trying to match you, and neither of you can get anywhere. And it's the same as rock, paper, scissors, because even if you win very often in rock, paper, scissors, and you're like, I can predict what people do, it's just mind games. And mind games is not the same as real competition, because they might be thinking much more than you are, and you're still winning because they just aren't accurately judging what you're going to do. And same vice versa. Now, the other counter argument that people give is that they're like, sure, in terms of where to dodge and where to aim, it's basically random. Even if you adapt to people and like common play styles very well, and you learn patterns and you're able to predict people pretty well, it is ultimately rock, paper, scissors. But what they'll say is that the thing that overcomes that outdoes it, and is able to be consistent, is dark resting. Now, that's actually shot camping. Dark Rust was a player that did it often. Dark resting or shot camping. Basically, what this guy would do that played Bad Lion Archer, he would stand perfectly still, and when the enemy took a shot, they wouldn't shoot directly at him because they were expecting him to dodge. And while the enemy was pulling back their bow right after that shot, he would have free time and he would shoot directly at them, and they wouldn't even be able to dodge because they were pulling back their bow. If you don't know in Minecraft, yeah, you can't. You become basically not immobile, but you move very slowly while pulling back your bow.
Yeah.
And so that strategy got him a lot of wins, and a lot of other people started doing it, especially at close range where you have very little time to even move. And this also, like earlier, it seems like, well, okay, clearly that's something both players can compete with, and like one person does it better, but it still isn't, because ultimately, well, there's a couple reasons. To get into that situation where you can actually shot camp, the first thing that has to happen is they have to not shoot at you. and you can't control that. You can't also predict when it's going to happen. So you have to assume to begin with the next shot they take is not going to be straight at me. So that's the first thing that has to happen. After that's happened, you have to assume that they're actually going to pull their bow all the way back, and they might not. The counter to shot camping is to pull your bow back a little bit, drop the arrow, and then just move and not actually pull it back all the way. And that'll fake out the person shooting at you to take a shot when you were still able to move. So you have to be able to firstly say that they're not going to shoot at you. And then after that's happened, you're waiting. You have to be able to predict when they're actually committing to the shot and when they're not going to move. Because if they move, it's just as useless. So even though there's a lot of things you can do, and there's different ways of trying to counter the opponent, no decision has any incentive attached to it.
Right, it's vice
No
versa.
decision, no decision is an exceptionally good decision or bad decision, except for unrealistic examples like shooting up or trying to run into the arrows, because obviously nobody's going to do that. In terms of aiming, once you figure out the furthest the person can go to their left and the furthest they can go to their right, you have this area of where you can shoot that they could go. And any shot in that area is a good shot.
Yep.
Because you don't know where they're going to be. Similarly, with dodging, anything's a good dodge. I mean, you're limited in how far you can move, but you can stand still, move a little bit. Whatever you do is basically a good dodge because you have no clue how they're going to shoot. The only exception to that is if you're very far away and you have time to see the arrow coming, you can make sure that you don't get hit.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, you're not going to be able to always play at long range. Especially on like Hypixel, they can pro up close to you, you can pro away, they can pro again, they can try to push up closer to you, and oftentimes Bow Duels players will, as they're dodging, be holding W. So they'll move forward over time. If you ever watch, where people that are new to Bow Duels can actually figure this out quite quickly, or not figure it out, but they'll believe it easily. If you haven't played the game much and you watch a third person, like bird's eye view of people playing, which Sam and I are going to do in a minute, it's very obvious that neither player is actually like applying pressure or gaining control or doing anything that isn't random. They're just doing what they understand how to do after playing with so much experience, and they have expectations about, you know, what the other player is going to do. If you play a lot of people and you notice that they only stand still in very specific situations, you'll get used to it. And you'll begin to expect players to do that, and you'll counter them by shooting straight on in that very specific situation. The thing that happens when people do play a lot of bow is they will swear that they are good. And they'll think that they understand what good dodging and bad dodging is, good aiming, bad aiming, other than just it's good aiming if you got the shot, and it's good dodging if you don't get hit. It's hard to say why. A lot of it is probably because of just so many people play with similar styles that you can. It's like, imagine, this is unrealistic, but imagine rock was really popular, like for people to do when they played rock, paper, scissors. And so obviously there's something you can do to win more often if you know that. And in Bow Duels, there's a lot more different options. Once again, you're not restricted. You can do whatever you want. But people, because there's so many things to do, they will stick with their own little, like, this is how I understand to play, and so this is what I'm going to do. And so in that same way, people who play a lot of games will get used to it. They'll change how they play, and they'll be able to get a lot of wins, and a lot is a lot. If you look at someone like Legend Caleb, who has heckin' over 600 streak on Hypixel and just Bow Duels, he does that because nobody can get shots on him. The people that do get shots on him don't get nearly close enough to killing him. And so as a Bow Duels player, you really look at that and it's like, well, shoot, obviously he's good at the game. Like, obviously something is different about the way he plays, but it legitimately is just the distribution of style. He's somebody that is actively trying to counter people, and everybody else is either not trying to counter as much or just kind of, you know, not playing the game often.
Right.
Anybody that's new to the game is typically easy to kill if you've played for a while.
Yeah, you can't get good at. You can't. There's a cap at getting quote unquote good at bow duels. It's really only getting good at your playstyle or
Yeah,
good at recognizing a playstyle, which is pretty rare in the first
yeah.
place.
Different kinds of styles there are changes from different servers too, because it feels like you're playing a different game if you go from like Hypixel to Mineman or like Stratus. Stratus used to have speed. Maybe they do still have speed. I don't know. But people will very easily believe that there's a large skill distribution. But the reason that ultimately doesn't work, and this is like the big idea about why the game doesn't work, is that strategies, decisions, playstyles do not rank up in a linear way. So if you start at the bottom and you say, okay, this strategy is bottom tier, and you start to go up, you say, okay, well, this strategy beats this one, so that's slightly higher. And then you go from that. It's like that one is beat by this one, so that's slightly higher, and so on and so forth. Eventually, you will end up with strategies that lose to strategies that are below them in the ladder. So it's not even just a circle. It's like a big web of different things that beat other things, which is why it's like rock, paper, scissors. There's a lot of different ways you can play. Not three. There's a lot of different ways you can play. You can't objectively say that any one of them is good or bad, because they're only good or bad depending on what they're matched against.
Having good aim helps you win at mid-range. Having good aim only helps you, and it's only good aim half the time. The only good aim you really need in bow duels is vertical aim. If you're at long distance, it's easy to overshoot or undershoot. You'd have better aim if you can shoot the correct distance.
The reason I say that the skill ceiling is an inch above the floor is because there are certain skills, they're really Minecraft skills that you get used to. And those are things like knowing how high to aim based on the distance from the enemy, because the arrows are affected by gravity, obviously. And so you have to know how high to shoot. Being able to flicking can help sometimes, but you have to be at close range, and you also have to have full power, because if it's not full power, then they still have time to move.
Yep.
And in order to have full power, you have to do that situation where you're shot camping. So no control there. And maybe just timing in the sense that you're shooting as fast as you can. I can't imagine anybody that wouldn't. You right click again the moment you let go. I don't know.
Right. That just comes with playing the game after a while.
Yeah. And just being able to, play a WASD mouse game. Typical skills there. But anything past that, or I guess you could also say like being able to tell how far someone moves, that way you can get that kind of area. Anything past that isn't really helpful in bow duels, because as the meta changes, people just adapt to what people are doing, and the way that you play just gets further and further away from what you started with, but eventually you can go back to what you started with.
There's also different skills depending on the server, like knowing when to gap on Minemen or good pearl placement in bow duels.
The only exception to like the ideas of aim being inconsistent and being a range of places you could shoot is with pearls. The only exception with that. And pearls do add a little, like this tiny bit of skill to the game on top of the other like inch and a half that there is. And on Hypixel, if you think of Hypixel, both players get 2 pearls. So that's 4 instances that might not even happen for that skill to occur. And typically it only helps one person or the other anyway, so it's like 2 instances. So other servers don't even have pearls. I think Stratus might have more than 2. I don't know. The big thing that's frustrating to see when people play the game is they will characterize a lot of other kinds of strategies based on how useful they are. But you can't objectively say if they are useful. We'll talk about things like strafing versus jump dodging, your timing, like how long you're waiting in between shots based on your expectation about the other player, like what range you play at. People will say that that whole idea doesn't really apply at short range, because at short range, a full power arrow is basically a bullet. Like you can't really move out of the way.
Right.
But at short range, you still have to have the time to get a full power shot. A lot of times at short range, people are not shooting full power. They're shooting half to a tick past half, or tick before rather. And those arrows are still easily dodgeable because it's like, throwing a paper airplane at the other person. Like they still have plenty of time to move.
Right.
And if you do get a full power shot, you might be getting shot at. And the only way not to is if they're not shooting directly at you, which once again, you can't control. There's no incentive to, it's like, I should be shooting to their left or right now. It's like, you don't know what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. If you expect them to stand still, then you're going to shoot at them. If you don't expect to, you're not going to shoot at them. But the entire game, and ultimately the way that people talk about it and get better, is all just like mind games. It's like, he thought to do this, but I thought to do this. But he expected me to think that, so he's doing this, but I expected him to think that. It's like, that's stupid. Because you have to stop at some point. You have to, yeah, mind games don't they don't facilitate real competition.
Well, here's something else. There's a lot of things that you could have that could be related to skill in any Duels game, but even then, those things that could be related to skill don't happen very often. And since there's a lot of things that happen, like pre-firing around a pole, pre-firing a pearl, aiming at a pearl, distance vertical aim. All of those things could be necessary or not be necessary in a game.
Yeah.
More than once or zero.
Yeah, they're not definitive. The reason that people are winning so often really doesn't have much to do with those legitimate skills that you can learn and get better at and are consistently valuable at the same rate. That's the whole complaint, is that nothing is consistently like valuable. Like it might be valuable against this person, but it might be detrimental against this other person. And it depends on what they both do.